Good morning, everyone. Let us consider magic today. Let us talk a little bit about the relationship of magic to rationality, to the arts, to science, to everyday judgments that we make. Magic is a source of inspiration for all kinds of intellectuals, including psychoanalysts, and perhaps one of the most well-known author on magic as a source of inspiration and a source of insights in psychotherapy and in understanding life in general was Carl Jung. According to Jung, magic is a realm which is located in the unconscious, whose sources, whose symbols, whose epistemic tools and epistemic potential are located in the unconscious, in the realm where, as Jung says, there are magnets which determine what we do on unconscious level. The unconscious, according to Jung, determines what we do as conscious members of our communities and the society, as conscious actors in our lives. Other authors such as Joseph Agassi and Ian Yarvie. Joseph Agassi is now a late philosopher, recently deceased, and Ian Yarvie, an active philosopher, wrote about the relationship between magic and rationality, and distinguished between at least three levels of magic, where the primitive magic on a fairly low and let's call it a beginner's level of science, and modern rationality is very much the same as rationality. So on that lowest level, magic is the same. For example, magical chanting and the magical incantations and magical interventions to cure the ill would be very much the same as any medical intervention, because the medical science at that stage was not developed, and the observed from the outside, the work of the magician and the work of a physician or a healer would very much look the same. Now, on a more advanced level, Agassi and Yarvie argue magic becomes separate from rational activity, specifically in this example from medicine, because the medical intervention starts to be governed by a limited set of rules that are based on evidence and clearly defined validation tests, whereas magic is lagging behind on that level of development of rationality. So Agassi's and Yarvie's view of magic is very much a developmental view, where magic is fundamentally seen as something primitive, as something that is associated with intuition, whereas intuition, in their view, is different and even opposed to rationality. So intuition takes precedence in situations where there is insufficient rationality, insufficient knowledge. Intuition is as a make-do epistemic tool. It seems to me that this is a fundamentally problematic view of magic, because what we see and what is exemplified in the first paradigm that I mentioned, that perhaps championed by Carl Jung and psychoanalysts, it seems that what we are facing is really a shortage, a lack, an absence, an insufficiency that is inherent in our rational knowledge, in our ability to rationally explain things, in our ability to deal with life challenges on a fundamentally rational level. And magic does not succumb to those limitations. Magic seems to be associated indeed with intuition, and intuition appears to be couched in the body. It appears to have to do with bodily processes. and it seems that the body, through its various altered states of functioning, might be able to tell us something about things that our rationality can't explain and can't grasp. So it seems to me that the Jungian idea that, as he says, he says it at once in one of his paragraphs in his red book. He says, "Last night I was visited by the dead, and the dead had apparently offered him interpretations of various symbolic content of his dreams." It seems to me that our bodily sensations, our dreams, our intuitions, which have the magical property to them, which have the magical ring to them, really allow us some sort of contact, an epistemic bridge into the experiences and even future events and dilemmas that the life poses before us, which simply cannot be accessed by our rational thinking and by our everyday conscious epistemology and rationality. So let's not be too condescending towards magic. Let's consider magic an unexplored area for human knowledge and human psyche more generally. And let us consider, together with the psychoanalysts, the role the body and the magic associated with the intuitions embedded in the body can have for expanding our knowledge, not contrary to our rational epistemologies, but as an addition to them, as a supplement, as a complementary realm of cognition. And this is why psychotherapy is in fact magic. Psychotherapy is based on a fundamental toolbox of epistemic interventions, methods, phrases, interpretations, theoretical conceptualizations. But this is only the beginning. This is only the foundation of the process. And any therapeutic process that is effective cannot advance, cannot blossom, and can't develop into a beautiful structure which enhances the life of the client and also the life of the therapist without magic, without allowing the intuitions and the bodily cognitions and the yearnings and the anticipations associated with intuition that are basically magical because they cannot be evidentially supported to take a key dynamic role in fostering the relationship between the psychotherapist and the client. So magic is what sets apart successful psychotherapy and beautiful psychotherapy which enhances life from a dry and fundamentally in the long term unsuccessful psychotherapy. And in this I, while appreciating the systematization by Agassi and Järvi, and by while recognizing the evolutionary view of magic as a ritual and as a practice which is fundamentally sociological, to some extent anthropological, I disagree fundamentally with the review of the extent and scope and the very concept of magic, because I think that magic is not some kind of ritualized attempt to address life's challenges that is inferior to modern rationality. To me, magic is the unconscious ocean that underlies the small pond of conscious rationality in everything we do throughout the history of our species, and as a backdrop to everything that we think, that we intend, that we decide, and that we do. So magic is far broader than just this sociologically viewed social practice, historical practice. Magic is the potential in all of us. Magic is the source of creativity. Magic contains those Jungian magnets that move under the table and determine the movements of the figures of our rationality on top of the table. To this extent, I think we need to be focused on interpreting the magical as the complementary content of everything that is said on a rational level in psychotherapy. And a good psychotherapist listens to the client and views the rational content that the client presents, the complaints, the descriptions of the client's life situations, the client's worries, fears, and hopes, specifically in light of what is missing, what is lacking in the rational account, what is the complementary, the compensatory content which really allows for the partial meaning, the incomplete shape of the rational narrative to be completed by something greater and something more whole. And often, usually, this magical, unsaid and unconscious complement to what is the rational content and rational argumentation and judgment and interpretation of experience, usually that magical complement is where the answers really lie.